So tonight we have three distinguished guests. I'd like to introduce them to you briefly. The order of the evening will be, I'll introduce them, I will give them each 5 minutes to make some opening statements. I have some questions to ask them, which will have a conversation, hopefully amongst themselves as well. And then about 8:30, we will open up the questions from you in the audience. And we have some microphones in the aisle for you to ask your questions. So first, I'll just start on my left and move over. First to my left is Sister Damien Marie Savino. Her degrees include a Bachelor's of Science in Biogeography from McGill University, a Master's in Theology from the Catholic University of America, and a PhD in Environmental Engineering. And she's currently an Associate Professor and Chair of the Environmental Science and Studies Department at the University of St. Thomas in Houston. She also holds a joint appointment in theology there. Next to her is Dr. Anthony Strawa, and his degrees include a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, a PhD and MS in Aeronautical and Astronautical Engineering from Stanford University. He spent 20 years as an atmospheric scientist at NASA, and he's currently the director of the New Opportunities Center at NASA Ames Research Center. And he's also one of seven, I'll mention this in particular about him, he's one of 17 Catholic Climate Ambassadors, which is a national program associated with the Catholic Climate Covenant, which St. Mary's is also associated with. And finally, next to him is Father George Greiner. His degrees include a Bachelor in Science in Physics from Spring Hill College and a Doctorate in Theology at the University of Tübingen in Germany. And he's been on the faculty at the Jesuit School of Theology at the Graduate Theological Union since 1989. And he also served as academic dean there 1995 to 2001. So those are our three panelists, which I think you'll see we've chosen them because they have clearly scientific acumen as well as theology backgrounds. So I'm going to go to the first question because Sister Damien Marie brought up the term integral ecology, and I think that's an important term. Ecology is used throughout this document, so I think that's an important topic for us to think about. In section 11, Pope Francis states, talking about St. Francis, helps us to see that an integral ecology calls for openness to categories which transcend the language of mathematics and biology and take us to the heart of what it is to be human. So I guess the first question I'd pose to you is, what does this mean? What does integral ecology mean? And how is it that a college or university should go about talking about it or teaching about it?
Well, the integral ecology, I think, is a real keystone of this document. And integral meaning whole and part of a whole. And then ecology coming from the Greek word for home, so care for our common home. So it's like a holistic way, a truly Catholic with a small c understanding of how we care for our home. But it really is that combination of the natural ecology and the human ecology coming together, so the social ecology. And so the natural ecology, we're familiar with it as we heard in some of the other introductions about the interconnectedness of the natural world and that understanding of natural ecology. In the human ecology, the Pope refers to like the moral structure. That's part of our life together as human beings. That's like inscribed in the ecology of who we are as human persons. And that's part of this human ecology that he's speaking about. And I think he's also, in relation to the natural ecology, he's referring to the not only the instrumental good, but the intrinsic good of the natural world, just good in the being of being created by God the Creator. And so I think in terms of how we could do this as a university, I'll be interested to hear what others have to say, but I think helping students to see that interconnectedness of the human systems and who we are as human communities, the care that we need for the poor, and the poor, the Pope includes all the excluded, even the unborn, the embryos that are deserted, all of that is part of what we are to care for in terms of the poor in our midst, this human ecology, and then teaching our students to put that together with the natural ecology. And I think Catholic higher education really has to be poised for this, how to give that total vision that is there in the integral ecology. So that's for starters.
And we don't always have to go in order, but
Yes, I
it's
know.
fine if we do.
Okay, I'll go next. So ecology, an ecology for a region is defined as, what makes up things from the very smallest, from microbiology things to the very largest things of a region. So from micro to macro in a particular region. That's what an ecology is. And so when Pope Francis talks about an integrated ecology, that's really, really big. He's talking about kind of the whole global picture. And so as I mentioned before, we have to integrate the science with the economics, with justice issues, with the politics. All of that stuff has to be integrated. It's all interrelated. We can't have one without the other. And so that's kind of what I take away from the term integral ecology. Now, how do we teach that, if you will, or how do we experience that in an academic environment? I think that students have to ask themselves how they can take the lessons that they've learned in their chosen fields and apply them elsewhere, especially towards the ecological crisis. We talked at dinner about a recent New York Times op-ed that called for more exposure to moral traditions in universities, and also opportunities for enlightened experiences for student bodies. And I think that the Catholic universities and colleges have done an excellent job at doing that. And I appreciate all of you here showing up this evening to listen to this talk. I think that's really important. Most of the audiences I talk to have a lot more gray hair than this particular audience does. So it's good to see young faces out here. But these are the kinds of things I think that we need to continue to expose students to in order to equip them to make a broader impact in the world.
Thank you. If I were going to add something, I would say I think it touches on the self-identity of the subject. And this touches on the anthropology and the question of the interrelatedness. I think part of it is, I think we have kind of sometimes the idea that we're visitors to a zoo. and the world is the zoo, and we're kind of visiting there, and then we go home. We're part of the zoo. And until we become conscious that our identity is rooted in the cosmos, we're part of the cosmos itself, it remains something detached from ourselves. It touches directly on who we are. And I think part of the educational process is to awaken a sense of that identity as part of the cosmic sphere. It isn't easy because we always manage to imagine ourselves as users of commodities. But to see ourselves identified with the world that is actually in flux and in development is a shift, a kind of a significant shift. And it deals with theological anthropology, social anthropology. It deals in the area of what we understand of the human being. And not the human being as an individual, but the human being as a social element, not just in the human community, but in this larger evolving cosmos, which is the product of a long history of evolution.
So I think that kind of goes to the concept that Thomas Berry has talked about in terms of the human being a self-aware universe. It is the universe becomes self-aware. And that story he's talked about it many times and has brought out pretty well in a series, in a book actually called The Universe Story by Schwimm and Tucker. And they also have a series on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look for Brian Schwimm, there's a series of really well done documentary on this whole universe story issue.
I think he builds on the work of a German theologian, Karl Rahner, whom many may know. And for Rahner, the cosmos becomes conscious in ourselves, and we become instances of the consciousness of the cosmos. And that's where the cosmos in its move towards being divinized by God reaches self-awareness. So we're individual instances, but the body is the one body of the cosmos, which I find a very challenging and very beautiful way of imagining what the human being is. And it touches what Barry picks this up in his work.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So I think we're at a point where we're at the point that I'd like to go ahead and open up.
Because we'll keep going here forever.
Yeah, we're
I
at
know.
the point I
We'll never shut up.
for
Okay.
8:30
Yeah.
for people to come up and ask their own questions about this.
I'm Professor Felicidad Oberholzer, and I teach theology here, and I think I'm going on for 40 years, but I'm not sure. So I have seen a lot of changes in young people in that period of time, and I just wanted to take up some of the conversation that was met. First of all, Professor, I have tackled the problem of kids with media and so on by taking off 40 points if it appears any place. And since they are so grade conscious, this works very well. But the thing, just even taking that, I mean, technology is wonderful. There's so many benefits that we have because of that. But what I see is how it affects, and I'm just taking students right now, but I would say I could expand that to a broader level, is let's just take the cell phone thing where kids are on this and they're on it all the time. But it becomes so narcissistic. Like I'll say to them, do you really have to tell someone what you had for breakfast? Do you think they care? It's like having to give every event of the day. But what it does is it keeps them from being related to each other, face to face, to be able to have a conversation, to talk. And I think when you talk about development, you know, we could say physical development and cognitive development in human beings will take place naturally if basic things are provided, food and warmth and so on. But when we get beyond that, there's levels of development that don't just happen unless you are part of making them happen, such as psychological development, spiritual development, moral development, and relational development. And I think that the advantage, I think, of teaching theology is that I can say things like, you know, God loves us, and Scripture says right from the beginning that we are to love each other, that that's our vocation. And that love is not a feeling. It's the desire for the good for another. And desiring something for someone else and really working to do that doesn't mean that you even have to like them, but it does mean you have to care about them. And that's something that we, I think, really have to nurture our students into seeing that there are developments on those levels which they have to participate in. Because if we want to do something, we have to really care about other people. And I say, you know, my students a lot of times don't know what's happening in the world. They do know that we're in a drought and things like that, and they care. And I say to them, why don't you read the newspapers or listen to the news? And the answer is, I feel overwhelmed by it. I don't trust our politicians. I don't want to know it. It's just too much for me to know. So how do we get them to be concerned and not to be so overwhelmed, but to feel empowered in their own lives and who they are? And I also tell them that freedom doesn't mean getting to do whatever you want. Freedom, according to the church, means that we are able to choose the good. That's what freedom means. So how do we learn to choose the good, and how do we encourage them to do it? And as teachers, all of us, all of you, me, and people here, how do we do that? How do we inspire our students to really love? Because I think that then, when we talk about these other problems, we're willing to give ourselves toward it. And the other part of technology is the media, and the influence, especially in the United States, on materialism and consumerism, and how that becomes the idol. I have to have more and more. But God doesn't love us for what we have, but for who we are. Just some thoughts.
One thing I could say, it might sound a little simplistic, but in terms of how to motivate young people, I do really think some of it could happen. This is where, like, creation is an entrance point.
Yes.
Because if you can enter in and bring into that experience of awe and wonder at the beauty of creation,
Yes.
that's an open door, and it might lead to further steps. And so yeah, okay, yeah. So I think that's a good start.
People don't realize that in Genesis, where it's talking about the creation story, that there's lines that says, and God saw that it was beautiful, or that God made something that was beautiful. That is right in Genesis, that beauty is so important right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Oh, one more?
My name's Ken Worthy, and I teach environmental studies courses here. And by the way, next semester teaching sustainability, and we'll be addressing a lot of these questions that, well, are coming up here today. And we'll be talking about the Pope's Encyclical. And one of the things I wanted to say is just a statement, which is that as an interdisciplinary environmental scholar, I have found the encyclical to be just astounding in the degree to which it encapsulates the current state of so many environmental fields. And on top of that, the fact that it's coming from a world leader is just incredible. And so I think I just wanted to express that. In the trenches, working in environmental studies, trying to change the world in our small ways, to have this emerge in the world was just absolutely an amazing gift in our lifetimes. And it leads me to one of my questions, which is that I wonder, you've touched upon this a little bit, but I'm wondering what people's vision is for the future. How this will actually, in your wildest imagination, or maybe from a practical standpoint, how you see it possibly playing out and its effects rippling out. Could it possibly be the chaotic attractor we need to change systems on a large scale suddenly in a nonlinear way? And I think I'm forgetting my other question, so we'll go with that one.
So I think we talked about that a little bit. I mean, we're seeing movement in the U.S. Congress and Senate now that I never would have expected 2 years ago, in terms of people coming out, the Republican side coming out. In the past, they've always, been very strongly climate deniers. That's been the vocal voices there. But now the people who have a more, what I like to think of as a more rational approach, are beginning to speak up. People from Florida, where sea level rise is something they deal with every day, are beginning to speak up. And so I see real hope that Congress is moving in that direction. The U.S. is moving in that direction. The COP21 in Paris, there's a lot of the UN Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, I don't think I have the name right, but anyway, there's a lot of enthusiasm about going into Paris now, where all the countries are coming up with their plans to reduce emissions and things like that. It's not what we need. It doesn't go far enough, but it's a step in the right direction. So as I said before, I'm a lot more hopeful now than I was a couple of years ago.
I think maybe to complement what you're saying, I guess I would be hoping in the future for win-win situations where the natural ecology and the human ecology are both winning, because we've dealt with one losing, the other winning, and the tensions between there. And I think we can do it. And I think the Encyclical gives us a lot of hope for that, especially the last chapter on ecological education and spirituality. So I'm hoping we come up with some really robust solutions, and we are willing to take the risk to do it, to try something new that isn't linear, that's a totally new idea, but that might also improve, like actually make the land more fertile, or the animals more who they're meant to be, and make the human communities more who they're meant to be. And I think the answers are out there. And maybe I am too idealistic, like my priest friend always tells me, but I think we have to go for the gold, the win-win.
Okay, our last, we're done. I
Okay.
think. Anyway, I want to go ahead and thank our panel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I really enjoyed the conversation. It was great. So thanks to everyone who showed up.
Thank you.
Thank you.